This article from the Washington Post. Donald Trump, having propelled his presidential campaign to victory while often disregarding the truth, now is testing the proposition that he can govern the country that way. Joining me right now, the host of MediaBuzz on the Fox News channel, Howard Kurtz. Welcome, Howie. Good to see you. You know, I was thinking about this, and look, it's our job to hold him accountable. So if he says things are not true, we have to fire back, and we should. And maybe in some cases it could be done perhaps with a little more respect. CNN, are you listening? But it is our job to fire back. That said, I was looking at the overall media circle there, and you've got people right now, predominantly in the media, that really detest him and don't want to see him succeed, Howie. And no matter what little incremental amounts of success he is able to achieve, they will do everything in their power to tear him down and poke holes in all his programs. So if you're him, if you're Sean Spicer, how do you deal with this?
Well, the headline on my column today is breaking news. Trump is doing a lot of stuff that he promised to do. And yes, I'm not seeing a lot of stories about him by any measure, whether you agree or disagree with the policies, getting off to a fast start, the things you mentioned, plus TPP, the 2 pipelines and all that. So look, I mean, Trump fires back on Twitter. He also sits down with Sean Hannity tonight. He had an interview with ABC's David Muir yesterday. I mean, these people know how to deal with the media. And I'm with you. If President Trump says something that is factually challenged, 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, there's no evidence of that. That has to be pointed out, but it seems to me those controversies are overshadowing the more policy-based things that he's doing.
You know, I notice that a lot, and then I wonder why that is, but I get back to something that you and I have talked about repeatedly, and that's laziness amongst journalists and an unwillingness to actually drill down and understand the policy that's at work. I mean, it's no fun having to look at trade policy. It's no fun having to examine GDP data, unemployment data, understand what it all means. And I think that sometimes reporters get carried away by a sideshow. They encourage the sideshow. They love the sideshow, Howie.
They love the sideshow, yeah. And it creates what I call a split-screen presidency. So on the one hand, what should be the big picture on the screen is Trump signing these executive orders, he's going to build a wall, Mexico's president cancels the visit. And then in the bottom right, but sometimes it gets blown up into the main box, the main sideshow, as you would say, is the controversies over things that he says or tweets that may be exaggerated or untrue. And so it seems to me that, what do people out there in the country care about? Not the New York, Washington media corridor. It's things that will affect their lives, trade, immigration, safety, terrorism, and not so much these Beltway-centered controversies.
Well put, indeed. Well, he's got a tough row ahead of him in trying to negotiate this path with the media. I think about President Obama, and he, over and over again, took aim at Fox because he didn't like how we treated him at Fox. I will point out, we always treated him with respect. We did point out inconsistencies in what he was saying. He didn't like that. But now you have an entire media operation machine that is really emboldened. And I think there's a herd-like mentality, right? It feeds upon itself. And so, you look at some of these press conferences, and I think yesterday's was improved, but some of these press conferences I've been watching, and you see the smirks on these reporters' faces, Howie. You see the disdain for the Trump administration right there in their eyes. It manifests itself in their questions. And I just kind of wonder, can't we get back to some kind of more formal, appropriate, respectful atmosphere?
Well, the media have an inherent preference for sniping over substance, and I wish I could wave a wand and make that differently, but that's the way it is. I do have to say, though, that to some extent, there have been times when President Trump has stepped on his own message. Had he not said the thing to congressional leaders about 3 to 5 million people voting illegally, then the media wouldn't have
he does do that. In other words, he'll talk off of maybe that fact was on the tip of his tongue because he heard it or thought he read it somewhere. Now, that said, I don't care if there's so much as one fraudulent vote. It should not exist, and there's no reason why we can't have an investigation into this. John Fund, who spent a good portion of his career investigating this stuff, says nobody's been willing to look at this because the left has been so sort of in the tank for making sure that everyone, maybe even some people he thinks that shouldn't be voting, are voting, meaning, there's concern about dead people potentially voting. But, Howie, why not look at it The question is, maybe Trump might have invited some of the criticism on himself. I hear you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying it's not a story, and I'm not saying it's not legitimate. What I am saying is balance. Focus on the things that affect people's lives. It's like the campaign
Don't give the
where
media
the
any ammunition. I hear you.
The controversies became bigger than the substance of what
right.
he was saying in that campaign.
Because they'll take it, they'll run with it, they'll get completely sidetracked, and then all of a sudden they're forgetting about the important stuff once again. Anyway, Howie, good to see you. I know you never forget about the important stuff. Everybody should watch you on MediaBuzz on the Fox News Channel, 11 a.m. Eastern every single Sunday.